What's the best way you've seen someone rebel against school rules? Kid poops in the trash can when the substitute wouldn't let him leave to use the restroom. I'll never understand Bull's rules about not being able to use the restroom for 10 minutes or whatever the frick arbitrary time is set. We had a French teacher who was really bad and most people barely tolerated. It happened a few times that whoever arrived first would stand outside her door as if waiting for her to show up and unlock it, and the rest of the class would just queue up behind them pretending to believe them. Meanwhile the teacher would just be sitting inside wondering where her class was. Late 80s, my high school banned tank tops, but they were allowed with something over them. They also banned mesh or sheer shirts, only allowed with something under them. Guy I knew, pretty much every day, wore a tank top with a mesh shirt over it. I went to a Catholic grade school growing up that had a strict boys' hair length policy. It couldn't touch the collar of your shirt and I wanted long hair. So the principal came in one day to talk to the class. When she was leaving the room she called me out for my long hair in front of my classmates. My response was to point to the cross hanging above the door and say Jesus had long hair. She didn't know what to say right away and seemed embarrassed but then pulled me outside and yelled at me to get it cut. Don't mess with Catholic nuns. You can almost call it a Hail Mary tactic. Back in the 1980s there was one kid in my school was hardcore into the punk scene. Had a bright blue, 6 inches high, razor thin, stand up straight mohawk. The principal gave him detention for being a distraction, etc. And his parting words that day were "and tomorrow, no more blue mohawk." The next day the kid came in with the same mohawk, only bright pink. He should have seen this one coming. Senior year, my school banned jackets. A friend was cold, wore his jacket to lunch, and the VP told him to take it off. Friend pulls out the student handbook and asked where it said he couldn't wear it. VP flips for a while and ends up showing him the, or anything the administration seems disruptive, clause. Friend rolls his eyes but takes off his coat. The next day, friend comes in with the same tweed sport coat the VP wore every day. Not me but my friend's dad. So a good 50 years ago, his teacher told him his tie was the most important part of the uniform and he had to wear it no matter what. That lunchtime he gathered half his school year and the next day, about 100 people turned up wearing nothing but underwear and a tie. In 3rd grade, early 90s, my brother did not want to participate in some sort of multiple class activity. He just hung around the edges until a teacher approached him and told him, "Now dear, you can't be here without participating." Brother took what she said to heart and waited for a chance to slip away. He made it about 3 miles before a family friend noticed him and drove him the rest of the way home. I remember mom being upset at him, but even more angry at the school for taking 4 hours to notice he was gone when they took a head count after lunch. One day my friends and I had gotten to school early for an extracurricular event. After the event we decided we weren't really feeling school that day and decided to do the 3-hour walk home. One of my friend's mother saw us about 2.5 hours into the walk. A guy I know ran a campaign to lift my old high school's strict policy on facial hair, which is to have none unless religiously exempt, which they gave you a card for that I and probably others called the beard badge. He refused to shave and had a banner and shirts made that said "With a great beard comes great responsibility." Someone stole a key from the janitor. He just left them on his desk. It happened to be a universal key to all the locks, except for the server room. The server room although had a second hidden door which they found. They came in after school and stole the servers from the school. All the grades and data for the students were on those servers. The teachers had to figure out how to recreate all the students' grades, which honestly they did poorly. Pretty much everyone passed every class. You could just argue for a better grade. My brother missed enough school during the year that the school required he attend summer school. The penalty for not attending summer school? You'll be kicked out of summer school. So he never went, and they didn't hold him back, because he knew all the material. Blistering heat to the point of people passing out. We're all forced to wear black trousers. We're dying of the heart and a guy comes in shorts, gets sent home only to return after reading the school rules on uniform. He is in a school colors plaid skirt. Freaking legendary. I was in a Christian high school at the time. The day before winter break rolls around and I had packed a few Toblerone chocolate bars and some notes for the teachers I most appreciated. with the intention of leaving them as a Christmas gift. Before school, the principal made a public announcement that students were not to give any teachers any gifts unless we were going to give all teachers the same gift. This was obviously a bit of a problem since I couldn't exactly come back the next day with additional candy bars. So I marched into her office to address this issue. Upon entering the office, I made a show of opening a chocolate bar and breaking off exactly one piece and placing it on her desk. I told her that I was going to give her a full candy bar, but I now had to share her chocolate bar with other teachers that I didn't really care so much about anyways. That rule was quietly lifted. Now share IT. When I was in grade 7, our last class of the day, students would always bring in snacks. Our lunch shift was way too early in the day, so by the end of the school day we'd all be feeling hungry. And we were all told by our teacher that if we didn't have enough to share, we couldn't eat in the classroom. One day, almost all of us brought in enough food to share, even with the students that didn't bring anything in. We even synchronized the times that we pulled all our food out. Our teacher was clueless. She had no idea what to tell us. There wasn't any school-wide no food in classrooms rule, so she couldn't run to the principal. Finally, she gave in to our malicious compliance and allowed us to share food for the rest of the period. Soviet anthem plays. In my private school, boys were required to wear a collared shirt. It really wasn't enforced until one day it was. I was wearing a sweater without a collared shirt underneath and I had to go back to the dorm and change. I argued that I didn't look ratty or underdressed at all, but they said rules were rules. The next day I wore a white t-shirt with a collar, cut off from one of my older shirts, stapled to it. It looked terrible, but rules are rules. DIY builds. Okay, so we need to have clear backpacks, right? This kid puts quite the vulgar image depicting the counselor on one of his notebooks and packs it against the edges of the pack. Guns and drugs. The kind of thing that kids aren't supposed to have, so they just toss them into their backpack loose like a knot, wrapped up or stuck into a book or something. After 9/11, my school made a rule where we had to wear our school IDs. They went overboard quick, handing out detention to anyone who didn't wear one. One kid had his ID blown up and put on a shirt. On the back it said, "Yes, I'm wearing my F-King ID." He got detention for not wearing it with the shirt. We had to do that too, but then everyone started using them as weapons and whipping the crap out of each other in the hallway, or Indiana Jones snapping it at St. Peter's. It lasted less than a year before they took them away. A kid was passing notes, and the teacher caught him and insisted he had to give the note so she could read it out loud. He ate the note. I can only imagine what it said that he felt the need to eat it, lol. I was at a private school that had rules about the length of boys' hair. One guy in particular always ignored the rule and the administration would tell him to get a haircut every so often, but he never did. Eventually, when his hair got about down to his shoulders, the principal pulled him aside and told him his hair was twice the allowed length and by next week it needed to be shortened by half. Monday rolls around and he comes in with half his head shaved and the other side as long as ever. We were impressed by literal interpretation of the principal's request, but it still ended up with him getting a suspension for a week and he had to shave the other side before he could come back. He should have just combed the half over. When I was in high school, there was a rule implemented that if you showed up late to school, you had to go to the front office to get a detention slip. You would then have to give it to the teacher for that period, who would then mark it down, and you were required to go to lunch detention for that day. I figured out by the third slip that literally no one cared. Teachers, security, or students. So when I was subsequently late for the rest of the year, I would take out an old slip that I had from a previous detention, walk through school, give it to my teacher to mark down, then take it back to give to the lunch detention supervisor. But I never went to detention because the front office didn't have record of me being late. I was late no less than 50 times my senior year, only having been reprimanded the initial 3 times. I even told my parents about it after I had graduated and even they agreed it was dumb and funny. There was a presentation on vaping last year by some poor woman from an advocacy group or something. After every sentence, or whenever she paused, the whole assembly, all 300 kids in my grade, would give a massive standing ovation. We weren't stopped until we had done it like 15 times. During my senior year of high school, 2008, My school got super strict about cell phones. It got to the point that we weren't allowed to have them out during any point in the day, not even during our lunch period. They claimed that we would send each other test answers or something like that. Anyway, a friend of mine who was a year below me was tired of the rule and how rude teachers were when enforcing it. He literally looked at his phone to check the time and got it taken from him for the rest of the day. That next week he comes to lunch with 2 old and non-functioning flip phones. He takes the first out and pretends that he's talking to someone on it. A teacher was instantly on him. They walk over and hold their hand out for him to give it up. He looks at the teacher and then proceeds to break the flip phone in half and puts it in their hand. The teacher was speechless. She just walked away without saying anything. He takes the second phone out and does the same thing again. The second teacher thought it was pretty funny. Flash forward to 2015 and I start working at the school as a student mentor. And now everyone is allowed to have their phones out pretty much at any time. How things change. My school had the same rules. We would play on our calculators in class and make it look like we were on our phones, so when the teacher came to take it away, they were rather embarrassed. They realized they fell right into our trap. Likewise, some kids would purposefully get their phones taken away only to have a friend spam call the phone that got taken away to cause even more of a distraction. Guy was wearing shoes against the uniform policy and was asked to put on shoes from lost property. He went around school barefoot all day. After the Columbine shooting, our school banned black trench coats. For the most part, nobody cared, except the mysteriously gothic trench coat kid. He had worn a trademark black trench coat every single day because it made him different, and then all of a sudden the school tells him he can't do that anymore. So the kid went out of his way to find or make different colored trench coats and wore those instead. My favorite one was covered in duct tape. TLDR, Gothic Joseph in the Technicolor trench coat. Reminds me of a guy who came to school every day dressed in old-fashioned, formal clothing, suits, top hats, cravats, fake, fur coats. I bumped into him the other day and he still dresses like that. I'm glad he does. My daughters both went to a Catholic high school. My younger one had a bit of a wild streak. The girls were required to wear a skirt every day to school. My daughter did not care for this rule and wore her skirt around her head one day since the dress code required the students to wear a skirt, just not wear. I was told that she was wearing spandex underneath. That's how my daughter got a new rule in her high school dress code. It wasn't a big defiant act or anything, but I loved it and it always stuck with me. One day in high school, we had a particularly hard snow. We were certain school would be cancelled, but womp womp, no dice. No one was allowed to leave the building during lunch, but a bunch of kids said frick it that day and ran outside to have a big ol' snowball fight. We all watched as they had an awesome time, and a couple of rounders joined in. I was too chicken crap. They all got detention, but I know it was worth it. It was so simple and harmless, and I remember it almost 15 years later. That sucks that they gave detention for having a snowball fight. I swear, high schools treat their students like prisoners. We weren't allowed to wear sweaters that weren't from school. This rule was never really enforced, but they had just come out with a new sweater design after like 20 years of not having one, and they wanted to get all the money from the students they could. I, like a good student, started going to school with the school sweater, one from 20 years ago that I found in my dad's closet. There were many confused faces in the principal's office that day, but ultimately me and my sweater lost. I had a teacher who got into a power struggle with every reasonably smart kid, so we tended not to try in her class. As a result, she began to grade the progress monitoring tool we used. This proved to me that a tool didn't matter. If it did, she would have graded it from the start instead of waiting until she realized she looked bad. So I began to fail every test I took on the platform. She was really angry at me and told me to call my parents, but my parents backed me because choosing to fail is not a violation of any rule. I should have used that with my parents. Elementary school had a ban on extreme hair colors. My brother shows up with fire truck red hair. Principal stops us both as we're entering the school and she's going off on my brother. She's berating him, saying, "Who do you know that has red hair like that?" Without skipping a beat, Ronald McDonald. Principal just grabbed him, dragged him into the office. My 4th grade brain was in shock that he just won up to grown up like that. She called my dad and he promptly didn't give a frick, and months later bro went from red to green to purple. She called my dad and he promptly didn't give a frick. This is a delightful turn of phrase. In high school during the student body president election, my friend started a campaign that was kind of a meme at the time. It was a poster that featured a green faceless figure in a suit that said vote for nobody. Nobody tells the truth. Nobody will fight for you. Nobody cares, with nobody being personified as this faceless figure. We put up posters for it with all the others and even started a Facebook page for jokes. My buddy even had a green full body morph suit and planned on running on stage during the other speeches and dancing around. Eventually the admins got word what he wanted to do and called him in and told him if he so much as even went to the assembly in costume or not he would be suspended. So he didn't go to the assembly and all the posters were taken down. Instead he just showed up to school in the suit and just walked around waving at people and giving finger guns at passers-by. He was suspended anyway and went down as a legend for it. No one recognizes the green faceless figure in a suit as old anonymous. I am saddened. In 11th grade, now 30 years ago, we were told to use Memorial Day as a weather makeup day from Hurricane Hugo. Us students, and many teachers, felt this was disrespectful and suggested to just add the day to the end of the school year. The state insisted. Very few people showed up for school, including me, my brother, and most of the faculty. Same, but ours was on a Saturday. Almost no one came to school. A buddy of mine was caught messing with his phone during class. Back then, the school rules were that if you were caught, your phone was confiscated for an entire day, and you couldn't get it back until the next day. This was before smartphones, and the rules have changed since the 10 years that I graduated there. So, buddy hands in his phone, but doesn't seem too worried about it. He waits a couple of classes until lunch break, and asks me to come with him. He's gonna get his phone back. We go to the staff room, where the confiscated phones were held, and asks a teacher there if he could copy down a phone number into my phone, so he could call his dad later that day. Teacher agrees, and gives him the phone. I hand him mine, and we wait for him to copy the number. When he's done, he gives me mine back, and sticks his own phone in his pocket. He was known as a bit of a joker, so when he jokingly said, "Welp, thanks a lot, see ya," the teacher immediately laughs, tells him to stop messing about, and to give the phone back. Laughing and joking about being caught, he does, but not really. See, he had a second phone, exact same model, except this one was broken. Wouldn't charge anymore, he said. So, when he stuck his good phone in his pocket, it was right next to the broken one. When the teacher made him give back the phone, he just gave back the broken one. It was the best switcheroo I have ever seen in my time at that school. He was so fluent, so nonchalant about the whole thing. It was amazing to see. Yeah, that rule is a terrible rule. Thank goodness I've never been in a school with that rule. My phone's my only alarm, and without it I'd sleep in an extra 5 hours. True story. Our school had a rule that boys couldn't wear shorts. Girls could wear skirts. Though, in the deep south it gets hot. Shoes were not in the dress code. I didn't wear shoes for 2 weeks. Other folks followed suit. School amended their dress code that year, added shorts and shoes. I'll never understand the southern dress code. I've lived in the north, midwest, and south. You could wear whatever length shorts you want in the north and midwest, but heaven forbid you wear a tank top. Complete opposite in the south. Everyone at my high school had to wear jeans but could wear tank tops. Ridiculous. Teachers said boys need their shirts tucked in. Never said how much needs to be tucked in. So when one of my friends got told to tuck in his shirt, he stood still, used one finger, and tucked in a tiny portion of the back of his shirt into his pants, then walked off. Was later called to the office because they thought he was acting out and not obeying rules, but the kid's parents said that he followed the rule. It never said the whole shirt needs to be tucked in, so the principal, secretary, and teacher all have to let the kid off. The next day, the principal makes an announcement to the whole school that boys need to have their entire shirt tucked in the entire way. We laughed about it. Someone should have taken off their entire shirt and put it in their pants. This was prior to smartphones circa 2002. One of my classmates was a regular class clown. He would buy brownies in the cafeteria and roll them up in his hand so they looked like a convincing piece of poo. He would then do all sorts of antics with this poo. Put it on seats, throw it at people, what have you. Obviously the school staff caught on and he got in trouble. This guy didn't go quietly though. He was required to sit alone at lunch for the entire school year. There were months left before summer. The one teacher who made sure his punishment was severe made regular rounds of the lunchroom to maintain order. She would pass his lone seat during her rounds. One day he made another very convincing pastry sauced poo and had it ready for her when she passed. The entire lunchroom was watching out of the corner of their eyes while maintaining an alibi conversation with the people close to them. When she passed, he stood up and snuck behind her and slipped the pastry poo in her purse that she was carrying on her shoulder, and he quickly ran back to his seat. The lunchroom burst into laughter and the teacher had no idea why. Until later, of course. The dude was an artist at rebellion. You really have to be a psychopath to do this. And by this I mean forcing a kid to eat alone for a whole year. The canteen stopped selling sachets of red sauce due to the mess some kids were making. My friend carried a huge bottle of red sauce in his bag for at least a month and provided illegal red sauce for the cost of 5p per squirt. Made a fortune. I transferred to a high school in the deep south my junior year, from an American school for servicemen's families in Germany. They had just introduced a dress code and so everyone was rebelling against it. One of my male friends wore a dress which adhered to the dress code. He got suspended for creating a disturbance. I rollerbladed to school, and I realized that rollerblades met with the dress code. Shoes will be worn at all times and cover the heel and toes. So I wore them to school. My homeroom teacher thought it was hilarious. The principal did not. He pulled me into his office and told I had to change because of insurance liability. I explained that I'd been skating since I was 2. I had more experience on skates than some of the freshmen had walking. He agreed, but sort of pleaded. I told him I saw his point, but the dress code stated that shoes had to be worn at all times and I'd forgotten them in homeroom. So he grabbed a random freshman out of the hall to fetch them for me. I also did the rollerblades hunt against the dress code play one day. I think the principal found it more amusing than harmful and gave me no punishment when I agreed to not do it again. Friend was told in high school by his guidance counselor not to waste his time applying to his dream school because he wouldn't get in. He got pissed off and went to the principal, who told him it was the counselor's job to give her best opinion, so he trusts whatever she says. He applied anyways, and got in. He took the acceptance letter, made a copy, and taped them to both the principal and counselor's door with thanks for nothing written on both. He didn't even go to that school. He couldn't afford it, but it was the principle of the matter. The I trust what my counselors say thing is such a lazy attempt for the principal to essentially say, I don't want to deal with trouble from my staff, so I won't even address the problem. Had vending machines outside the buildings, but due to some shat vandalizing them, this, understandably, pissed the school board off. The machines were put off limits, but could not be powered down due to some kind of contractual obligation of constant availability. In an effort to combat that, faculty were posted at the machines during class changes to prevent purchases. But, thankfully, no one was posted at the machines during class time. Mind you, this is 1997 to 1999 era. We weren't happy as it was our sole source of caffeine on campus. We decided to heck with that and made purchases during class. Me, being the lithe, tiny guy I was conscripted to be the buyer. While the teacher was either out of the room or indisposed, or let's be honest, intentionally distracted, I would collect cash and requests, 4 at a time, and hop out the emergency escape window that they had opted to not have an alarm on and walk 20 feet to the soda machine and make my purchase. This went on for some time until the drink companies lambasted the school board for not restocking their dwindling supplies. Allegedly as per contract, they put 2 and 2 together and realized that purchases were still being made. Apparently I was not the only gopher, and lifted the ban on my last year. My high school was always issuing new dress code rules for the girls. Mini skirts had to be longer than your arm, no tube tops, etc. One day, all the boys dressed in drag, breaking all the rules. No violation because the dress code specified only girls. That's bulls. If you got long ape arms, you gotta wear stuff down to your knees. If you got short butt T-Rex arms, you can just walk around in your underwear. It's not really a rebellion against the rules, but a good friend of mine had a special talent to make teachers like him despite having no respect for the actual school system. He used to study on his own to ace the tests, rarely showed up to classes he didn't like, and still got perfect report cards with high praises from all the teachers. The height of it was where he convinced his homeroom teacher to come pick him up from the beach before an important test. He eventually went on to have a great military career, but if he ever gets into politics, I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow managed to convince everyone that world domination under his rule was their idea. I think I like this guy. Sounds like the type of dude who could lead us to world peace without anybody realizing what he's doing. Or, alternatively, lead us all to world annihilation. So let's hope he uses his powers for good. One of my classmates got sent to the office for wearing gang colors because he has a red Marine Corps bandana tied to his backpack. The rest of the year he wore a pinstripe suit with vest and carried a fedora. Funny how the mafia isn't considered a gang. At my middle school you weren't allowed to use phones on campus, including after school. A lot of my friends and I had no choice but to stay late after school, so we asked our security guards if we could use our phones, and his answer was, as long as your bus is on this campus, you can't use your phones until after 4. We also had a rule saying that once you left campus, you can't come back without a reason, like an extracurricular activity. Lucky for us, there was a sidewalk right outside the school that we could sit on while still having our feet on the campus. So we would sit our asses down on the sidewalk and still be on campus. We could use our phones and we could still stay at school. No hats in school. In high school junior year, there was this one kid in my grade that was allowed to due to him having alopecia universalis, which is basically having rapid baldness. A new teacher wasn't aware that he was allowed to and asked him to take it off. The kid explained why he was able to, but the sub didn't believe him, forced him to take it off, and was being very cruel to him for wearing the hat his lack of hair. The next day, everyone wore hats to school as a sort of rebellion against the teacher. She got really mad and started yelling at the students and said some nasty things. She got fired. I went to a tiny Baptist high school. I had banned stickers on the back of my car, including one for bare naked ladies. This was deemed inappropriate and I had to remove it or I wasn't allowed to drive anymore. So I just started parking in the community college parking lot right next door, up against the school's parking lot with my bumper facing the school. They couldn't do a darn thing about it. I went to a very Christian school where on Halloween we were allowed to dress up for that day, but we couldn't wear any unholy outfits, like ghosts, demons, or basically anything scary, or witches. Now, my friend had an idea to screw over the teachers, so the next day she showed up in a witch costume, but it was a 17th century Salem witch trials witch. She's wearing a Puritan dress and holding a Bible. The teacher asked who she was. She would say, "I'm a witch." The teachers were put in a situation where she was technically a witch, but it was historical blah blah blah. She did end up at the principal's office for breaking the rules. She got to wear it though. Should have shown up as St. Sebastian bloodied with arrows all over. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.